Today, we are going to discuss which teams will make the NFL playoffs this season. And of course, we're going to be totally unbiased, regardless of me being a Packers fan. The Green Bay Packers are making the playoffs. All they need to do is win out the rest of their games and then... Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. It might be real lonely in January on this channel, Grossi. And today, as we discussed, we are going to be going through each conference and predicting which 7 teams from the AFC and NFC are going to make the playoffs.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
We're going to go through each team's matchups. The majority of them have 5 games left to play, though there are some teams that are on their bye week this week. So we'll go through. I'll give you what I think their final record is going to be, their standings, and at the end of it, we'll have our 14 playoff teams. So let's get started by looking at the current playoff picture, and we'll start over in the AFC. The AFC as it stands right now, at number 1, you got the Bills, 2 Chiefs, 3 Ravens, 4 Titans, 5 Bengals, 6 Dolphins, 7 the Jets, and on the bubble, you got the Patriots, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Browns, and the Steelers. The Steelers all the way back having a 5-7 record. Now, the Bills this past week, they jumped up to number 1 in the AFC, due to the rest of their division losing and the Chiefs losing, but they don't have the easiest of schedules left compared especially to the Chiefs, who kind of have a walk in the park. The Bills obviously had the tiebreaker over the Chiefs because they were able to defeat them at Arrowhead earlier this season, but things are about to get crazy. Taking a look at the remaining schedule, they have the Jets, the Dolphins, the Bears, the Bengals, and the Patriots. So no walk in the park here. They have 3 divisional matchups. They're currently sitting at 1-2 in their own division, and while teams like the Jets and the Bears and the Patriots, I think they'll be able to take down. The 2 games that I have circled here that are going to give them problems are going to be the Dolphins and the Bengals. And I think, unfortunately, that they're probably going to lose one of them. Now, the Dolphins game is being played on Saturday night, and the way that the Dolphins showed up or didn't show up against the 49ers definitely bodes well for the Bills, but I do see them losing at least one of these games. Here I have them losing against the Bengals, meaning they would end with a 13-4 record. Following that, you got the Kansas City Chiefs currently sitting at 9-3. Yeah, their schedule, they got the Broncos, the Texans, the Seahawks, the Broncos, and the Raiders. Yeah, they got a really nice end of the year schedule. The only teams I see them giving potential problems are maybe the Seahawks a little bit, but I don't believe in their defense. And then the Raiders, who they went toe-to-toe with earlier this season, was able to escape with a win, though the Raiders have been on a hot streak as of late. But I do see the Chiefs finishing out the rest of their schedule with just wins across the board, meaning that they would finish with a 14-3 record. Considering how they've been playing, and yes, they did lose to the Bengals, I just think the Chiefs are going to be tough to stop, especially with these opponents. Then you got the Baltimore Ravens sitting at 8-4, and their remaining schedule is no walk in the park either. They're going against the Steelers, the Browns, the Falcons, the Steelers again, and the Bengals. So again, 4 out of their 5 matchups are going against divisional opponents. Throw on top of that the Ravens, they just have not been playing well at all. Lamar Jackson's going to be week to week as he's dealing with an injury right now, and that doesn't bode well for the team. So I actually see them losing 3 out of their 5 next games. I see them losing against the Steelers in this matchup. They'll win against the Browns and the Falcons, but I see them losing to the Steelers and Bengals at the end. The Bengals, I think, should definitely beat them. The Steelers, I have them losing twice to, one this week because I think it's going to be without Lamar Jackson. And for their future matchup, the Steelers defense has been really good. And on top of that, they've kind of figured it out on offense. They're running the ball efficiently. Kenny Pickett's not looking too bad. So the Steelers might actually surprise them both games. And so with that, the Ravens would finish with a 10-7 record. Following that, you got the Tennessee Titans at 7-5. They don't have too much of a problem with the rest of their schedule. They got the Jaguars, the Chargers, the Texans, the Cowboys, and the Jaguars once again. I see them winning 4 out of the 5 next games, with their only loss coming to the Cowboys. Maybe the Jaguars give them a tough time. And with the Chargers, I just think that the Titans D-line is going to dominate that depleted offensive line of LA. So the Chargers could definitely get a win over the Titans, but right now I just think that defense is going to be too tough for them to stop, and hell, the Chargers' run defense is non-existent. So with that, the Titans would finish at 11-6. Then you got the Bengals at 8-4. They got 5 games remaining. They're facing the Browns, Buccaneers, Patriots, Bills, and Ravens. So not the easiest of schedules. They might have some tough times with the Buccaneers and their defense, though I don't think they'll have any problems with their offense. Then they have a team like the Bills, and then, of course, finishing off with the Ravens. I said earlier that I think they'll beat the Ravens at the end, and the one tough game is going to be against the Buffalo Bills. That should be a really fun game, and is probably going to be a playoff preview. The Bengals at that point should be healthier. Joe Mixon will hopefully be back by week 17, and I have the Bengals escaping with a win there. I said the Bills are probably going to lose either the Dolphins or the Bengals game. Here, I had them losing the Bengals game, so the Bengals would win out for the rest of the season, finishing with a 13-4 record. Then at 6, you got the Dolphins at 8-4. They got the Chargers, Bills, Packers, Patriots, and Jets. I only see them losing one of these games. I know they had a really bad game against the San Francisco 49ers, but they're really not going up against another high-quality opponent like that, because either they're going up against a good defense and their offense is not so great, or vice versa. I see their one loss being to the Buffalo Bills. They should be able to take care of the Chargers, the Packers, the Patriots, and who knows who the QB is going to be for the Jets at the end of the year. So the Dolphins would finish with a 12-5 record. And finally, for those who are still in the playoff picture for the AFC, you got the Jets at 7-5. They're going up against the Bills, Lions, Jaguars, Seahawks, and Dolphins. I see them losing 3 out of their 5 next games. I see them losing to the Bills. I think the Lions can beat them, and I think the Dolphins can beat them. I think they could get a win against the Jaguars and the Seahawks, depending on how good the offense of the Seahawks can go against guys like Sauce Gardner and how well that Jets defense has been playing. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, saying that they win at least 2 of those, but that would make the Jets finish with a 9-8 record. And so that's how I see the current playoff contenders, how they're going to finish out the rest of their season. But what teams on the bubble do I think are actually going to potentially make a run and sneak into the playoffs? Well, with what I just said about the New York Jets, I actually see a team bumping them out of the playoffs, and it might not be who you expect. The Patriots and Chargers are sitting at 6-6. They have tough schedules. The Patriots, I see them winning 1 out of their 5 next games because they're going up against some really tough opponents. The Chargers, I see them winning their next 3 of 5, but it's not going to be enough to get them in. The Raiders are basically going up against playoff contenders the entire time, but I see them winning 2 out of their next 5 games, losing to the Steelers, 49ers, and Chiefs. The Browns, I see them winning 2 more games the rest of the season, losing to the Bengals, Ravens, and Steelers. And so, with a shocking turn of events, I actually have the Pittsburgh Steelers winning out the rest of their schedule. That's right, fans. Steelers go Super Bowl, or at least maybe to the playoffs. And hear me out on this. Right now, they're sitting at number 12, but they're at 5-7. Their remaining schedule, the Ravens this week, which could be without Lamar Jackson. The Panthers, that's an easy win. The Raiders, that should be a really tough game and actually should be a really fun game to watch. But I think that defense should be able to contain Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams. And again, that offense should be able to score against the Raiders defense. They have the Ravens again, who I think they should be able to beat. And they finish off the year with the Browns, which who knows what they're going to look like at the end of the year. So I think it's very, very possible that the Steelers actually sneak into the playoffs and finishing the year with a 10-7 record. And if this happened the exact way that I said, with these teams winning these games and the Steelers going on this run, it would make the AFC look like the following. The number 1 seed would be the Chiefs at 14-3. The number 2 seed would be the Bengals at 13-4. Number 3 would be the Bills at 13-4. Number 4 would be the Titans at 11-6. And remember, just in case you're getting new to the sport, each division winner takes spots 1 through 4, so even if they have a lesser record, it doesn't matter. They're still going to finish atop the standings. Number 5 would be the Dolphins at 12-5. 6 would be the Steelers at 10-7, and the Ravens would be number 7 at 10-7. Now, if the Ravens beat the Steelers, you could see the Steelers actually get kicked out of the playoffs, and the Jets would be able to sneak in. But for right this second, I kind of do believe in the Steelers a little bit, which is weird. But that's what the standings would look like, and those would be the 7 teams heading into the playoffs for the AFC. The Chiefs would have a bye. You'd have the number 2 Bengals taking on the Ravens in a divisional matchup, the number 3 Bills taking on the Steelers, then the Titans taking on the Dolphins. So that takes care of the AFC, and let's look at the NFC. Right now, the standings are number 1, you got the Eagles at 11-1, 2, the Vikings at 10-2, 3, the 49ers at 8-4, number 4 are the Buccaneers at 6-6, disgraziad. Number 5, you got the Cowboys at 9-3, number 6, you got the Giants at 7-4-1, the Seahawks you got at 7-5, and on the bubble, you got the Commanders at 7-5-1, the Lions at 5-7, the Packers at 5-8, and I threw the Falcons in there just because they're still going to be competing for the division. So let's start off with the number 1 seed, the Philadelphia Eagles. Everything has been talked about them this year because they've had an easy schedule and the quality of their opponents. But listen, the Eagles have been kicking ass. Right now, the rest of their schedule, they got the Giants, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Saints, and the Giants again. I think all of these are winnable games. With their one loss, I think will come to the Cowboys if they are continuing to dominate teams like we've seen the past couple of weeks, though not against the Giants or the Packers. It should be a really, really fun game in December. That divisional game could decide who's going to win the division, but right now I do have the Eagles winning 4 out of their next 5 games, and with that, that would be a 15-2 record. The number 2 seed right now is the Minnesota Vikings at 10-2. Their remaining schedule, they got the Lions, the Colts, the Giants, the Packers, and the Bears. Doesn't get much easier than that, folks. I unfortunately have the Vikings winning out. I do think the Packers could give them a tough time, and you never know with the Lions because the Lions have been playing really, really well. But I do see them winning out, so they would finish with a 15-2 record as well. But the Eagles do have the tiebreaker over them because they kicked their ass on Monday Night Football. And yes, I still go back and watch that because that was the last time I felt joy and alive. But yeah, the Vikings unfortunately would finish the number 2 seed at 15-2. The number 3 seed as it stands is the San Francisco 49ers at 8-4. Their remaining schedule, they got the Buccaneers, the Seahawks, Commanders, Raiders, and Cardinals. Now, 4 of those games in a row are pretty tough games. All 4 of those teams are playoff contenders right now, and then there's the Cardinals hanging out at the end. So they are kind of the wild card here. Can their offense continue to function with Brock Purdy behind center? I think what they proved against the Dolphins, the answer is yes. That defense is arguably the best defense in football right now. Their pass rush is incredible, and the offense has so many superstars on it, it kind of doesn't matter who's behind center and throwing the ball. And I think Brock Purdy, the way he played against the Dolphins, who granted don't have the greatest defense, I think that they can succeed. I think they might have some trouble with the Buccaneers and Commanders just because their defenses are a little bit tougher, but I do see the 49ers winning out the rest of their games. They're a well-coached team. They have so many studs on the team, and again, their defense is going to kind of take care of business because the Buccaneers and Commanders offense, they're really not so great. So because of that, the 49ers winning out and finishing with a record of 13-4. Then at number 4, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have a 6-6 record. I have them winning 3 out of their 5 next games because their opponents really aren't so good. I have them losing to the 49ers, losing to the Bengals, and then winning out against the Cardinals, Panthers, and Falcons. The Falcons could give them a tough time, but we'll see how Desmond Ridder does, as it was announced that he's going to be starting. So with that, the number 4 seed would be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, finishing at 9-8. Following that, you have the Cowboys at 9-3. Their schedule, they got the Texans, the Jaguars, the Eagles, the Titans, and the Commanders. Some tough games with the Eagles, Titans, and Commanders, but this is another team that I think can win out because the Texans and Jaguars, those are going to be pretty easy. The Eagles, as we talked about before, I think that's going to be a big win for them in December. The Titans, they should be able to take care of because I just don't believe enough in their offense. And the Commanders are another team that could be tough because it's a divisional matchup, and the Commanders are going to be fighting for a playoff spot in Week 18. But I do see the Cowboys just being the better overall team, finishing with a record of 14-3. Number 6, you got the Giants at 7-4-1. They got the Eagles, Commanders, Vikings, Colts, and Eagles again. Woof. So looking at that, I see them losing both games against the Eagles. The Commanders, they just had a tie with them. I can see them losing that game. So I see them losing to the Eagles twice. The Commanders, they're going to have a tough time with. The Vikings should be able to beat them. So their one win, I think, comes against the Colts. And it's not a knock against the Giants. I just think that they're playing with a practice squad right now. And while they did put up a valiant effort against the Commanders, I just don't really believe in them for the rest of the year. So they would be finishing with a record of 8-1. And finally, the team that is at number 7 right now, you got the Seattle Seahawks at 7-5. Their remaining schedule, they got the Panthers, 49ers, Chiefs, Jets, and Rams. I see them losing 3 out of their next 5 games with wins against the Panthers and the Rams. The 49ers kicked their ass their first time this year. I think that they're going to be able to do it again just because their defense is so good. The Chiefs, yeah, that's not going to go well with your defense. And then the Jets, I actually have them losing to as well because I think the Jets defense is going to be able to contain Geno Smith. Plus, they know each other very, very well. And the offense will be able to do enough to score on them. Though I definitely can see the Seahawks winning that. With this scenario, I would have the Seahawks finishing at 9-8. And then looking at those teams that are on the bubble, you got the Commanders, the Lions, the Packers, and the Falcons. The Commanders, they have a bye week this week, and then they have the Giants, 49ers, Browns, and Cowboys. I see them beating the Giants. The 49ers, I see them losing to. The Browns game is going to kind of be the most important game, not only for the Commanders, but also for the Lions. There's a lot of implications that are there, and I think that that's actually going to be a really close game. We'll see how Deshaun Watson looks besides like a piece of garbage that week and seeing if he can will them to victory. But if that defense is able to make his life miserable, the Commanders could win. Meanwhile, I see them losing against the Cowboys. And so the Commanders, who still will be fighting for a playoff spot, if they're able to win at least 2 of their next games, there's a good shot that they are going to make it into the playoffs if the Giants do collapse. So that's something to keep an eye on. And then taking a look at the Detroit Lions, their next few games, they got the Vikings, the Jets, the Panthers, the Bears, and the Packers. So nothing is impossible here. The Vikings I see as a loss because I think the Vikings voodoo magic is just too strong at this point. And even though the Lions are looking really good as of late, it's going to be tough to beat them. The Jets game is arguably the most important one of their season because that's not only going to determine the Jets' fate in the playoffs, it might also determine the Lions' fate. Even though it's an AFC team, you have the Commanders who are also going to be neck and neck with them, so every game is going to count at this point. They should be able to beat the Panthers, they should be able to beat the Bears, and then it comes down to the Packers. And that's going to be really interesting. Are the Packers still going to be playing for anything? Is Jordan Love going to be starting? That could determine if the Lions make it into the playoffs or not. Because right now, if they win 4 out of their next 5 games and the Commanders lose their next 3 out of 4, the Lions are going to make the playoffs. And so right now, I actually have that as the scenario, which I'll explain in a hot second. You do have the Packers at 5-8. They have a bye this week. Then they have 4 games remaining. I see them beating the Rams, but the Dolphins game, the Vikings game, and the Lions game are all going to be tough, and I think Jordan Love is going to be starting that last week. So I do have them losing their next 3 of 4, which is sad, but you never know. The Packers might be able to do something. And then the Falcons, they have a bye, but they have the Saints, Ravens, Cardinals, and Buccaneers. I see them splitting with those 4 teams, and so that wouldn't be enough to go and capture the division. So if all of these scenarios happen, this is what the NFC would look like. The number 1 seed at 15-2 would be the Eagles. Number 2 would be the Vikings at 15-2. Number 3 would be the 49ers at 13-4. The Buccaneers would be 4 at 9-8. The Cowboys would be 5 at 14-3. At number 6, you'd have the Seahawks at 9-8. And at number 7, you'd have the Lions at 9-8. Now, if the Packers win that last week and the Commanders, they still lose all those games, the Commanders are going to make the playoffs. If the Jets beat the Lions, the Jets would be in the playoffs and probably knock the Lions out, and it will allow the Commanders to sneak into the NFC. So Lions and Jets are those fringe teams right now, and they play one another, so that game is going to be crucially important for either of their playoff aspirations. But right now, I do have the Lions sneaking into the playoffs. And what does this mean for the current standings? Well, it would mean the Jets and the Giants don't make the playoffs, while the Steelers and Lions do. Sounds crazy, but it's been one of those seasons. We'll see how it goes. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Before we get out of here, I want to do a big shout out and thank you to some brand new Patreon and YouTube members. On the Patreon side of things, we have What's Your Favorite History Subject, which if that is a question, it's post-World War I history. Big shout out and thank you to you. And over on the YouTube side of things, join the Grossi Posse Plus, we have Montclair Biker Boy, Twisted Squid Evil, Craig Brobeck, and Brian Bradshaw. A big shout out and thank you to you all. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think the Commanders are going to make it? What about teams like the Jets or the Giants? Do you think the Lions have a shot? Or who knows, the Raiders? Maybe they show up against these 3 teams that I think they're going to lose to. Let me know. You know, send me at TomGrossiComedy.com or TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.